They feel stuck because they don't know what decisions to make, or they're scared to really commit to one decision.
I went through all the phases of not knowing what I really wanted to major in, and it set me back a lot in my studies.
I had to choose if I wanted to fit in or if I wanted to be happy.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Vantage Point, real talk about the challenges of today and what the Bible says on how to deal with them. Joining us today are Keanna Bradshaw, Gary Salovino, and Russell Dongelin. Now to get things started, let's go around today's panel, and if everyone could share please, what are the big decisions that you are faced with right now?
At the moment, I am conflicted on whether I should continue on to higher education like college or university and then find a job that is in relation to what I studied, or if I should just go straight into working. But going straight into work sometimes isn't the most sustainable. It can also be very inconsistent. So I'm open to going the more traditional route of going to college or to university and then getting a job after that is in relation to what I studied.
One of the big decisions that I'm faced with right now is a lifestyle change. I haven't made a lot of the efforts to allow myself more free time or just to be able to accommodate for all of my obligations because I've been entrusted with different duties in the church. I have a job now, so I go to that during the day, and then I have my classes at night that follow. So you can imagine that I probably need a little more discipline than I give myself now, and that I need to decide how to work around these schedules so I can help where I want, where I'm needed, as well as achieve all of my goals. And something that kind of goes hand in hand, just a little like on the other hand of things, is the decision sort of affects me being a social person. If anyone knows who I am, they know that I'm always talking to people. I'm always hanging out with my friends or talking to my family. So I also love meeting people as well. So that kind of is where I'm making the decision, which is my second one, to decide who I want to keep closest to me, especially as I go through these pivotal moments in my life.
I've been considering pivoting between staying where I am and doing well and excelling in my current work, or pivoting to a new career. The biggest reason that I'm still in the job that I have is that it provides me structure. The schedule that I have, it lets me not compromise in any of my duties in the church and allows me to always perform and attend. And so I really value having that structured time. But at the same time, I want to pursue a career that can fulfill me in different ways. So the risk for that is high, but because of the worries and the daily needs that I have, the job provides me. That's why I stay, but I see the value in doing something else, which is why making the decision is difficult.
Gary, let me ask you this. So our thought process on making decisions, do you think it's the same for everybody?
Brother Felmar, I don't think everyone approaches making decisions the exact same way. Some people, they're very impulse driven. They make a decision on the spot based on how they feel. There's others that, in spite of how they might feel, they'll do what's required that's aligned with their goals. Our condition and our environment also play a huge role in how we make decisions on a day-to-day basis. But what's really becoming even more common and more apparent is that a lot of people feel stuck. They feel stuck because they don't know what decisions to make, or they're scared to really commit to one decision that they could really decide on. And I'm actually just describing myself in this scenario.
Coming from what Gary said, Brother Fell, do you have any advice for us when it comes to making decisions?
Absolutely. But as always, it will be based on the Holy Scriptures. Let's read Jeremiah 29, verse 11. I alone know the plans I have for you. Plans to bring you prosperity and not disaster. Plans to bring about the future you hope for. So, as people of God, what should be our basis when making decisions? God stated, I alone know the plans I have for you. So, when making decisions, our basis should be God's plan or His will for us. God, who is our Creator, already knows the plans He has for us. Now, think about this. Will there ever be a time that our own plan would be better than what God has planned for us? Well, the short answer to that is no. But, Russell, what's your response to that?
It's like what was stated in the verse that God already knows his plans for us. And so there will never be a time where our own plans or our decisions would outweigh what God has in store for us. No matter how meticulous we are when it comes to planning our future, and even if we have set goals and ambitions in life, sometimes those plans never come into fruition or they don't pull through in a way that we expected them to. Whereas God is already navigating our lives, He already has everything set out in front of us, and we just have to trust in His directions.
Right. Since God is almighty and all-knowing, His plan is the best possible outcome for our life. Now, we're not saying it's wrong to have a daily schedule or for your parents to help you plan out a career path. But to ensure the best possible outcome, we must make sure that our plans, our decisions align with God's plan or His will for us.
But how can we really tell if our plans align with what God has planned for us?
That's a good question. Well, for starters, God doesn't want anyone to end up in disaster or ruin. But disaster is waiting for those who end up doing what is sinful or end up breaking any of God's commandments. So, a guiding question that we can ask ourselves before making decisions, especially major ones, is this: will any commandment of God be broken in the process? If so, refrain. Now, Keanna, could you share with us, please, a time or a situation when you were faced with a decision which could affect our Christian values?
Yeah, so I think I speak for a lot of people when I mention like the one word, which is school. I went through all the phases of not knowing what I really wanted to major in, and it set me back a lot in my studies. And one of the biggest decisions that I could think of at the time was to focus on school and take a step back from my offices in the church. But just I till this day I struggle with that idea alone because we always were taught like to put God first and that our plans would succeed. So yeah, that I thought really hurt, and it still does. Like just to imagine that I even had to go through that experience, and I'm still working through this situation till this day. So it's a very real like situation for me during this time. Brother Felmar, I actually have a question. We heard earlier from the Bible that God plans to bring us prosperity.
Right.
But what about those who do believe in God, but until now they don't have prosperity?
Well, that's because there's a big difference between genuinely trusting in God and simply believing. Now, while on today's show we are discussing trust in God, but if you or any of our viewers would like to know more or would like to have an in-depth understanding of really genuinely trusting in God, so we invite you to log on to our website, incmedia.org, and look for the program, The Message, and their episode, Trust God's Plan for Your Life. Another helpful program is the God's Message podcast, which has an episode, Trust in God at All Times.
But brother, what about the more intricate problems? Like, let's say someone has an office in the church, but things are really starting to pick up or get busy on the personal side of their life. Or the individual is in school and then now they have a job. Whatever their weekly routine might be, all of it is becoming mentally, emotionally, and potentially even physically exhausting. So my question is, how should how should we go about making decisions when the situation is less straightforward and really complex?
In response to that, let's read from the book of Psalms, chapter 142, verses 1 down to 5. I cry out to the Lord. I pray to the Lord for mercy. I pour out my problems to Him. I tell Him my troubles. When I am afraid, you, Lord, know the way out. In the path where I walk, a trap is hidden for me. Look around me and see. No one cares about me. I have no place of safety. No one cares if I live. Lord, I cry out to you. I say, you are my protection. You are all I want in this life. What we have read here are the words of King David. It's worth noting that as a king, David had wealth, he had influence, he had knowledge, he had power. But you know what else David had? He also had problems, numerous and complex ones as well. In those times of crisis, what is it that David did? He stated here in what we have read, he said, I cry out to the Lord. I pray to the Lord for mercy. I pour out my problems to Him.
Brother Felmar, what if others are thinking, but David was a king, like he could have turned to his knowledge, he could have turned to his power or the wealth that he had. Instead, he chose to turn to God. Why is that?
Well, it's because according to King David himself, he said here, when I am afraid, you, Lord, know the way out. There are really times in our life when we will encounter bigger problems, experiences that we may have never faced yet before. And those moments can be overwhelming, and in the moment, we won't have the answers. But God always has the answers. He knows the right and proper way out of our problems. That's why it's essential to be prayerful and obedient to God, so that He will guide us when we make decisions in our life. Now, Russell, could you share with us what has been your experience, in connection with making decisions? How have you found balance in your personal life and in fulfilling our duties to God? And how have you persevered?
If I look back at a few times in middle school and in high school, I was always judged by a lot of other kids because I was so dedicated with church and performing. And when they would ask me, oh, why are you going to church? Why are you doing all this? It was because they were being judgmental, and it wasn't out of curiosity. And being at such a young age, that's really difficult because I put so much pressure on myself to fit in and to have friends just because of having friends, and it wasn't because of wanting to create those genuine connections. So I had to take a step back, do some thinking, and decide what I wanted to prioritize. I had to choose if I wanted to fit in or if I wanted to be happy. And it was performing my duties, it was attending service, it was being with the friends and those connections I made in church. That's what made me happy. And while I, of course, still care about having a personal life of making friends outside the church, and I have personal goals, I also came to accept that I found a sense of belonging, and that's here in the church.
If we can go to Gary this time. Gary, have you been able to find that balance with maintaining, the things about our personal life, but still fulfilling our obligations to God?
For myself, Brother Felmar, I actually really related to a lot of what Russ just said. There's a certain balance that we want to strike with our lives. We want to make sure all of our daily needs are met. We want to make sure that we're able to put clothes on our back, food on the table, our daily necessities. So in the traditional sense, yes, I'm looking for a balance, but in a non-traditional sense, I've chosen to not be balanced. I don't ever accidentally want to see my situation as, oh, I need to spend less time in my duties, or I need more time for my job. I know that's something Keanna mentioned earlier, being concerned about that thought coming to their mind. I give my best effort to my daily needs, to my job and to make sure that I'm able to survive. But once that is met, I do everything that I can to really dedicate more of my time and effort and focus to the duties I've been blessed with, to the relationships I've built in the church, to continue to help with all of the different works and projects that we have. Because, like Russ said, that is where I found fulfillment and happiness and joy. Being around the brethren, helping with the different activities that we launch, continuing to be led and inspired by the brethren around me. That is where I want to spend more of my time. And so I don't ever want it to be 50% work, 50% being in the church. I want it to be as much as I can be involved in giving priority to my duties while still taking care of what I need. And so at least making that decision, as difficult as it might be in the moment, it's always been the best decision to make. That's what brings me fulfillment. And so I do that to give my best and more of myself to our Almighty God and to the works of the church.
Keanna, Gary, and Russell, thank you for joining us today on the show. God bless everyone.